Hello, folks. Welcome back to another episode of SHU Outdoors. And today we're going to do a thorough deep dive of Rikers Island, also officially referred to as the Corrections Department, City of New York. Um, Rikers Island, obviously, is an island, and it has a number of different jail facilities on the island. Specifically, it has eight. Um, when I was going through. I haven't been in that system for about 15 years now, so obviously things change, but I don't see them changing to such an extent that uh, my extensive knowledge of Rikers Island wouldn't be as relevant today as it was 15 years ago. So Rikers Island has 8 jails that are active. Um, what I mean by that are actually being used. And I've had the misfortune of being in 7 of them. All right. So we're going to do a thorough deep dive. But before we get into that, we're going to get into the theme song. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this content. Turn on notifications. Let's get this channel up and pumping.
Drop down, mostly to me. This has got past of day. Light of the moon shining down on me. Feel so alive when it's you and me.
Because Rikers Island is such a huge jail and it caters to, obviously, the city of New York, which is made up of 5 counties, also referred to as boroughs. New York County, which is Manhattan, commonly referred to as a city amongst New Yorkers. Bronx County, which is obviously the Bronx. Queens County, which is obviously Queens. Kings County, which is Brooklyn, New York, and Richmond County, which is Staten Island, New York. The 5 boroughs, also 5 counties, and everyone who gets arrested in that county who finds themselves, remanded to custody or with a bail they can't make, or, they cop out an arraignment to a year or less, is going to find themselves on Rikers Island. Now, when I was going through the system, you also had what they called the boat, which was in the South Bronx. It was a barge. Since they've closed that down, it's been closed down for a number of years now. And you also had the Tombs, which was downtown Manhattan, right in Chinatown. And I'm pretty sure that they've closed that down also. So all you're left now with is Rikers Island. Now, a unique thing about Rikers Island, right, is the address for Rikers Island is East Elmhurst, New York, which is Queens. So the bridge going into Rikers Island, and there's only one way in and one way out, is connected to Queens. So most people, if you didn't know better, you would think Rikers Island was a part of Queens County. But that's not true. Rikers Island is officially a part of the Bronx County. If you get in trouble on Rikers Island, like you catch an assault or something like that, and you catch a new charge, you're going to go to Bronx County Supreme Court. And that's where you would deal with that case if you was to get in trouble on Rikers Island, which lets you know that Rikers Island is actually a part of the Bronx. So it's a part of Bronx County. But it's connected to mainland Queens. So the main drag in Rikers Island is referred to as Hazen Street. And it's a massive complex of many jails. Specifically, when I was going through, the oldest building on Rikers Island is called HDM. And it's designed like an old James Cagney type of cell block with, the tiers and stuff. And that jail I've never been in there. And it's been closed down since like the late 80s, very, very early 90s. It was just an old rundown jail on Rikers Island. So first thing we'll do is talk about the different jails on Rikers Island and what those different jails cater to. So let's say you go to arraignment on Rikers Island. You go to arraignment in one of the county courts. So if you get arrested in Manhattan, you're going to New York County Court. If you get arrested in any of the other outer boroughs, you're going to go to that county's court. Okay, but it's all the city of New York County Court. So, but they're called Bronx County Court, Queens County Court, Kings County Court, Richmond County Court, New York County Court. So when you get processed in after you see the judge, you can't make bail. You get remanded to custody, or you take a city bid, which could be anything from 2 days to 5 days, up to what is referred to as 2 bullets running wild. Okay, so you could get up to 2 county years running consecutive, which is like 2 bullets running wild. And you would do that on what is referred to as C-76, which is the county building where you do like county time, So if you go there, you're going to get, back when I was going through, the only people who had to wear uniforms on Rikers Island, and we're talking about a time frame from like 1997 until like 2005, 2006. Back in the day in New York, I was a stick-up kid, and yeah, I'm not proud of that, but it did happen, and it is the truth. And as a result of that, I had the very unpleasant misfortune of visiting every jail complex on Rikers Island. So this is a pretty extensive deep dive, and I don't perpetrate fraud. So this is what's going to happen. Let's say you go to county court in Manhattan, which is the borough that I lived in, the Lower East Side. Then you get arrested for something, and they might offer you 30 days. So on 30 days, you're going to do 20. So you cop out to the 30 days. You go downstairs in the courthouse, which is connected to the Tombs downtown Manhattan. And you're going to get pulled out, and the officer, this happens to everybody. The officer's going to ask you, do you do drugs? Do you do this? What's going on? Boom. Just be straight up and be like, yeah, I do heroin, or I'm on the methadone program, or I do Suboxone, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't really matter, but what's going to happen by doing that, let's say you get 30 days. You're going to go right to C-76. You're going to be in the bullpens 2 or 3 days in between the courts and the bus ride to Rikers Island, going into the bullpens in C-76. Then they got to dress you out and give you a uniform. And it's a state green, just like they wear upstate New York. But it's going to be all raggedy. It's not going to be creased. It's going to be raggedy and wrinkly because that's just the way it is. So you get processed into there, and you're going to get your greens, and they're going to send you to a housing unit. Most of the people in there is going to be doing anywhere from, like I said, it's a county building, and you're doing city time. You're doing a city bid, and like Lil Wayne was in C-76. So, and numerous other people's been in C-76, like millions, And I'm going to say C-76 probably holds about 2,000, like at capacity, probably holds about 2,000 prisoners, and they have methadone in there, and I'm sure they have Suboxone and whatnot. And so you're going to stay there. You get 30 days. You do 20 days on 30 days. They'll call you and release you back to the bullpens, give you your clothes, put you on a bus. And at that time, they would take you to Queens Plaza because all the trains run through Queens Plaza. Now, I think they take you to the borough you got arrested in and drop you off there because too much was getting robbed around Queens Plaza because all the people getting off the bus from Rikers and going through the neighborhood doing whatever they was doing and then catch the train back to the borough where they're from, you know. So if you get arrested for a misdemeanor or a felony and you don't take the deal, let's say they offer you a year for a misdemeanor. They don't want to go to trial for that, and you don't want to go to trial for that, but it's not something you're going to cop out to. Why would you cop out to a year at your first court appearance and arraignment? No, so you're going to say, no, I want to go to trial, all right? Or they give you a bail, you can't make it, or you get remanded, but you're addicted to meth, you do heroin, or you're on the methadone program, and I'm sure there's a boxing program now. The Suboxone program wasn't that big when I was going through Rikers Island, but I know it's much bigger now, and I know the city of New York and Rikers Island is going to cater to that. So you would go to what's referred to as C95, also referred to as the detox building, okay? And it's a building, and it holds about 2,000 prisoners also, and it specializes in methadone maintenance, methadone detoxification. They also have what is called the KEEP program, where if you have methadone or Suboxone or you do heroin, if you're on a program on the street, they'll actually call it up and verify that you're on that program. So let's say you get 75, 80 milligrams of methadone, they'll like give you 60 milligrams because you've been through the bullpens for a while, and they'll maintain you at that 60 milligrams until you get out. Or if you have a serious charge, because they're not going to, at that time, it could have changed a little bit, but at that time, they're not going to give you no methadone or Suboxone when you get up north, which is what, you know, people call, like if you go to state prison in New York, it's called going up north because all the state prisons are up north. And we'll do an episode about that aspect also, but right now this is an episode about Rikers Island. So if you're a pretrial detainee, you're fighting your case for a misdemeanor or a felony, you're going to go to what is C95, okay? And like I said, that's the methadone building. Holds about 2,000 prisoners, and you got three main parts of C95. You got is what called projects, which is close to intake. You go through the bullpens, and then you come out of there, and they walk you down to what is called the projects, which is like a whole bunch of dormitories. Very cold in the winter, extremely hot in the summer. New York does not provide any air conditioner for any of their jails unless you're in a hospital or something. So it's smoking hot or real cold, and you're going to be in there. You also have something, you walk down a long hallway, and one side is called the light side, one side is called the dark side. And the reason for that, the dark side is more security. There's less movement. The light side is more of what they call the workhouses, where people work and go out in the hallways and sweep the floors and, you know, do whatever they do. And I've had that job also. Then you have what is C73. C73 holds about 2,000 prisoners, and it's just a pretrial detention building. You're not on methadone, you're not detoxing from anything, and you're just being held for a misdemeanor or a felony, pending the outcome of your case. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times they offer you a year or 6 months when you go to arraignment. You go back and forth to court, and it gets down to where they offer you 4 months and you got 60 days in or whatever. A lot of you'll come right back, or you might get released from the courts, you know, or you come right back and get processed out. So it's basically a waiting game at that point. And usually they will, because like the city of New York has way too many people involved in the penal system to take everybody to trial who don't cop out. So a lot of people end up going to the island and just laying up for 3 or 4 or 5 months or whatever and getting time served because it was a relatively petty, low-level felony or something like that. So C73 is a pre-trial detainee building. All right, so everybody in that building is just basically fighting their case, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. Then you have what is referred to as C74. That is an adolescent building, primarily adolescents who have a felony or a misdemeanor and they're fighting their case. Is pretrial detainees. It also has a section for state-ready prisoners, people who's done either found guilty by trial or they've copped out and they're getting ready to go up north. They'll transfer you from whatever building you're in, and they'll take you over to C-74, waiting for the state bus to come and pick you up and take you up north to either Ulster County, which is the medium reception, or downstate, which is the maximum reception. Um, you'll get an A number if you go through downstate. You'll get an R number if you go through Ulster County. Then you have what is referred to as OBCC. That's one of the newer buildings on Rikers Island. When I say newer, that's very relative because I say it's about 25, 30 years old, something like that. And it's more of a high rise. Where these other buildings may be 2 or 3 stories tall, like OBCC is probably 6 or 7 stories tall. Looks more like a hospital almost, but more modern architecture, and it looks a little bit more modern, but it's definitely a jail and not a good place to be. And it's just a pretrial detention building also. You can have a misdemeanor or a felony and be held there, depending on how you're seeing how your case is going to work out and how it's going to all play out. And you also have what is referred to as the Beacon, which is another building that's about 25, 30 years old, relatively new. And all these buildings hold about 2,000 prisoners, and each, maybe 2,500. So the Beacon is just another pretrial detention building. You can have a felony or a misdemeanor. You can be in there fighting your case, seeing how it's going to all play out. You also have another jail, which is called NYC, and that's the hospital for Rikers Island. So let's say you get shanked or cut or beat, or something happens on the street and you get arrested, but you need hospital care, and they transfer you to Rikers Island from if you have a serious injury, you'll probably be at Bellevue. They got a prisoner ward over in Bellevue in Manhattan. But unless it's something that's life-threatening, they're going to put you back over on the island, and they'll take you to NIC. And it's more like a dormitory setting with like hospital type of beds in there, but it's still very much so a jail. There's no misunderstandings about that. But you just have like nurses up there with the cops, and they come and give meds and whatnot because like you have an injury where you may be you can't walk well or whatever. So you'll be at NIC, and people there, they're giving methadone there also because it's a hospital. So if you get injured in C95 or C76 and you got to go to the hospital, you're still going to get your methadone or your Suboxone, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So NIC is the hospital for Rikers Island, and that's where you'll be if you have medical issues. And then you have another building. I'm not sure if it's open now or closed or how they're running that, but it's called Rosie M. Singer, and that's the building for the females. And it holds probably 2,500. I've never been in that one, but it holds about 2,500, 3,000 prisoners, and they're all females. And I'm sure they give methadone there also, and Suboxone, because, females have dope habits too. So that's kind of the rundown of Rikers Island and how it works. Now, we'll talk about the racial aspect of Rikers Island. And I will be honest, Rikers Island is obviously predominantly black and Hispanic. Okay? So you have the gang banging over there, but in my day, things could have changed a little bit now. Like I said, I haven't been in that system in about 15 years or so. But most of the gang banging, well, actually all the gang banging when I was coming through were amongst the black and the browns. The blacks and Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, because there's a very large Puerto Rican and Dominican population on Rikers Island. And so when I was first coming through, the only real gangs you had on Rikers Island back in the mid 80s, the mid 90s, was the Five Percenters, the Muslims, then the Yetas, the Latin Kings, and those were probably like the four big gangs on Rikers Island at that time. And then, like in the mid 90s, I caught my first bid in 97. So I was on Rikers Island, and the blood started coming through, and a whole bunch of mayhem and chaos resulted from that. You know what I mean? Rikers Island was weird. They would have 2 phones in each housing unit. So that was a source of constant problems and contention, because you got like 60 people. Each dorm is, if you're in the dorms, you can have anywhere from 40 to 60 people, depending on which jail you was in and how they run it. And they also had cells there, and they were all one-man cells. So it was a little bit better in the cells for the most part, usually because you didn't have as much competition for the phones. A lot of the violence that occurred on Rikers Island was directly phone-related, okay? Because way back in the day when I first went through, you could just pick the phone up and call and talk for as long as you wanted to. But because there was so much violence associated with that, they started giving you a PIN number, and you could only talk for 15 minutes at a clip. And you had to wait an hour in between each phone calls. But obviously, you have a lot of drug addicts and whatever go through there, and they don't have nobody to call, so they would sell their phone time. You get 2 free phone calls a day. 2 free phone calls when they implemented that system, 2 free phone calls a week, but you could make 2 phone calls a day, and they would charge it to your account. But if you didn't have no money, you would still get those phone calls. But if you did get money, they would take it. Now, from the white man's point of view, I will be honest with you. Yeah, it is a black, brown man's world in there. But you're not going to have a problem on Rikers Island just because you're a white dude. You know, and I know a lot of the other country, a lot of the other people who's watching this channel be like, well, that ain't the way we do it in our state, and I understand that. But if you go through Rikers Island, nobody's really going to mess with you because you're just a white guy. You know, with all due respect to the rest of the country, the city is just a little bit more sophisticated than that. Not to say that you couldn't have a problem if you're a white guy, but it's probably not going to be just because you're a white guy. You know, I've been all over Rikers Island. I've been on every building on Rikers Island. I did 14 years in New York State prison as a direct result of being a stick-up kid. And based on my personal experiences and what I've seen, I never had a problem on Rikers Island just because I was white. Now, I'm not saying I didn't have issues on Rikers Island, but it was never because I was a white guy per se. Again, I think the city's just a little bit more sophisticated than that. And that's my personal experiences. So let's talk about the woods and gang banging and how it compares to the feds. The feds is a completely different world. When I was coming through Rikers Island and doing my time in upstate New York, there was no white gang. Of course, you had a few bikers that would come through, maybe a skinhead or 2 that was on the super down low, because like you're outnumbered like 1,000 to 1 if you get on any kind of racial shit. You stand no chance whatsoever. You're going to get hurt bad. But if you're just a white guy, nobody's going to single you out for just being a white guy. That wasn't my experience. I'm not saying that hasn't happened or it couldn't happen or it don't happen, but it was just never really my experience going through Rikers Island. So you have white guys who go through there, constantly, but it's a black or a brown man's world. But with that said, you could have a job as a white guy. You could get jobs as a white guy. I mean, I've had jobs on Rikers Island where I emptied the trash, run the hallways, did all kind of hustles, and I just never really had anybody push up on me because I was a white dude. I had quite a few fights on Rikers Island and whatnot, but to be honest with you, it was never because I was white. It was because other issues that occurred. So you don't really have any, again, when I came through, things change. I never saw anything other than a Latin person as a Latin king. Otherwise, if you're not Latin, when I was coming through, I never saw anything but Latin people as Latin kings. And obviously, now that probably changed now because things change, but that's my personal experience. New York was very Latin orientated when it comes to the Latin kings. Then the Utahs was different. If they liked you and they felt that you had what it took to run with them, they would accept whites. It was primarily a Latin organization, obviously, but they would accept whites, blacks, and potentially gay people or whatever, because just because you're gay don't mean you can't fight and you won't bust your gun. I think there's a misconception about that. And I'm not saying that their ranks were full of gay people, but I did come across a few gay people that was in the Yetas and nobody was messing with them. You know what I mean? And they would fight and they would hold their shit down. So, I just think it's important to put that type of thing in proper context. I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody or any organizations, but I personally witnessed that, and that's what it was. Obviously, the Five Percenters is a black organization, and the name speaks for itself. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. You had the Muslims, which is a religion, but for all practical purposes, it was kind of like a gang in there. They all rode for one another, and that was primarily black. But Muslim is a religion; it's not necessarily a race. So you probably had a few other things in there also, but it was primarily black, and then later on, like I said, and like about the mid '90s. That's when the Bloods really started coming through in force, and it was a real bloody time on Rikers Island. I witnessed that. I got arrested in early '97 for my first state bid, and I went up north in '98. So I saw a lot of that bloodshed on Rikers Island. It didn't affect me because I wasn't in their crew, their gang. I was a white dude. So, like in New York, okay. And again, things change, so I can't speak on exact day and time, but I lived in New York for decades, New York City, and I've been all over Rikers Island and upstate New York. And you didn't have what would be considered any white gangs, period, all right? Because, I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but the white people, it was like, that's a black people and brown people gang bang. White people don't gang bang. That's the reason why there's like this culture clash in the feds. You got the East Coast whites, which they all gang bang hardcore, and then you got like the Northeast whites, and it's like the Northeast East Coast whites specifically. It's like, we don't gang bang. We're white, man. That's what black and brown people do. We don't do that shit. You know what I'm saying? Now, what you did have, and that is the truth, and I'm sure you got white bloods and Latin kings and all kind of stuff nowadays. I can only speak about my time, what I personally witnessed with my own two eyes and my experiences doing 14 years in the New York State prison system and going through every building on Rikers Island with the exception of obviously Rosie M. Singer, which is a female building. So it's not what I heard or what I saw or read or what I read in the book. It's what I know personally at that time. Again, things change. I don't never see there being no official white gang coming out of New York City. You just don't have the numbers. And honestly, for the most part, it's not really necessary because nobody's going to just single you out because you're white and start picking on you and trying to fight you. Again, the city's a little bit more sophisticated than that. Now, what you did have is a a small number, but a well-known number of white dudes that was well known in the system, coming through Rikers Island, going upstate New York, that was well known for busting their gun and beating the hell out of people. So you did have that aspect. But again, there's just no numbers there to like officially form a white gang. And honestly, it just wasn't necessary. And at that time, anyway, that I can personally speak on, the white culture was like, we don't gang bang, homie. We don't do that shit. That's what the black and the brown people do. Now, again, that could have changed. So nobody get their pennies in a ruffle because you, oh man, I'm this and that. That ain't the way it is. I'm telling you the way it was when I went through. Maybe in 2026, things have changed a little bit. I'm sure you got white guys are in all kind of what would be considered traditionally black or brown gangs now, but I'm talking about the way it was when I went through, not the way it is today when you're going through. I'm talking about the way it was when I went through and what I can personally testify to and what I saw with my own two eyes and dealt with and what I know to be a fact at that time. So you did have a handful of white dudes that was well known on Rikers for beating the hell out of people, stabbing people. They play a lot of razor tag on Rikers Island. So preferred weapon of choice on Rikers, the easy weapon is a razor. So you see a lot of people with buck 50s, and it's not because they were all snitches and stuff like that. It's just an easy weapon to have, carry, and get off with. I saw a lot of people get cut and stuff like that. And that's my personal experience about Rikers Island and what I witnessed and I can testify to because it's what the hell I know to be the truth. Other people may have a different truth, but if they're not somewhat in line with what I'm saying, it's not an accurate truth. People can spin any kind of story they want to spin. What I'm saying is the truth because this whole channel is about keeping it real. No sucker MC nonsense. And for you folks out there who don't know what sucker MC nonsense means, that's like back in the day, people in New York used to say, like, because you had the rappers and stuff. So yeah, you the MC, you got the rapper, but you're rapping on the mic, but everything you're saying is some sucker, it's some nonsense. So it's like sucker MC. So that's kind of like New York City terminology, New York State terminology from back in the day. I don't know if it's still used or still relevant, but that was something we used to say back in the day. Again, I've been all over Rikers Island, and this is Series 1. So after Series 1, if you got any comments or questions, hit me up, and I'll try to answer them or the best I can. And Series 2 is going to be about going through reception in New York State, and then the New York State prison system as a whole and how things operate. So I anticipate this will be a 3-part series. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share this content with anybody you know who may be interested in this content. Hit me up in the comments. I'll try my best to respond, and we'll take it from there, man. Let's get this channel up and pumping, man. Up and popping, up and cracking, up and rock and rolling, baby. Yeah, peace.